rather sad to say that there will only be one more upload after this, even though I have killed more people than the ones I've told you about. However, I'm not stupid, nor do I want to get caught, which is why I've tried to be vague as possible when talking about my victims. I told you the stories out of order. I can't risk getting caught, not now. I also can't risk someone recognizing a story I tell, and then have someone link me to a crime, as I've gotten this far without that happening yet, and I would like to keep it that way. I've also mentioned that I am no longer dormant, and so because of that, my calendar is rather full these days. So I apologize for any inconvenience, and I hope you all enjoy these last two stories. I know I do. They say practice makes perfect, and that saying itself can apply to most situations, murder included. The first time you do it, it might freak you out. Granted, not if you're a psychopath, of course, but after a few times, it sort of becomes part of your daily life, sort of like brushing your teeth or going on a morning jog. You might feel miserable and hate yourself the first few times that alarm goes off, and you have to jog a few miles at the crack of dawn when you'd much rather be in your bed. But like most things, the more you do it, the easier it gets, until soon enough you're running a marathon. I feel as if I should start off with a quick disclaimer. I actually met Tatia on Bumble, but for the sake of alliteration, we're going with Tatia the Tinder date. It sounds nicer, and I've already made somewhat of an effort with the other titles. Now that we're all on the same page, let's continue. Tatia Donovan reminded me of my mother, and that is really the only reason why I agreed to go on a date with her. In person, she looked even more like my mother. She was even the same height. The only difference was that Tatia had a rather attractive Spanish accent. We went on a date to a coffee house which was a 15-minute drive from my place, and she was about 5 minutes late. This sort of bothered me, because I originally did not have the intention of killing her. I was actually just looking for some time to kill. When she finally arrived, she ordered a hot coffee, black, and a bagel. I thought that was a bit cute, eating bagels in the middle of the afternoon. It reminded me of something that my mother would have done. You know, before she became a crack whore. But we've already discussed that, so let's move on. We talked for a while, and then she asked if we could go back to her place. Of course I said okay, I'm not an idiot. So we drove off, in our own separate cars. She had a rather nice home, 4 small pine trees on each side of her lawn, creating a sort of a tree fence. The path leading up to her house was wood, not sidewalk cement like most people's are. Her house was quite large, but not as ridiculous as Annika's had been. I followed her inside and looked around the living room that I was now standing in. All the furniture was wooden, even the walls were, and it looked sort of like a cross between a cabin and an old coffee house in here, which I liked. I stood there, looking at her home, and I didn't even notice that she had left until she came back with 2 glasses of wine. We drank some for a bit, making small talk about her life and her job. She was a freelance writer, and my job, I told her I was a university professor. After that, she pulled me up to her bedroom and we had sex. It was good sex. I mean, it was okay. It didn't blow my mind or anything like that. It was just kind of was. Sort of like when you first try something, a cake let's say, and it's really good, but the more you eat it, the less good it tastes. It was almost like that had become too familiar. It's not like I was having sex all the time either. It's just that it didn't really feel like anything new. Maybe I'm just psychotic, who knows. Anyway, it was a bit late when we were done, and Tatia had fallen asleep. I had not. So I decided to do the only thing I could think of doing. I decided to snoop around and see if I could find anything juicy. I pulled on my boxers and gently walked around the room to the other side of the bed where Tatia's phone was sitting on a nightstand. I stopped myself from picking it up, and instead, I walked over to my pants, which were on the floor, and took out my gloves from the pocket. I put them on and then picked up the phone. When the screen lit up, I stared at it. It was a picture of Tatia standing next to a man who had his arm around her. Her left hand was on top of his hand, and I stared at her finger, which contained a wedding ring. No less than 2 seconds later, a text came in from my love, and it read, "Sorry I didn't get to call you back. Too many meetings. I'll make it up to you when I get back next week. Smiley face." I sighed. Oh, Tatia. Why did you have to go and do this? Now I had to kill her. She was no longer just an innocent date. I opened the Bumble app on her phone and unmatched myself. Then I got dressed, very slowly, so she wouldn't wake up. And then I made my way back to the living room. I took the 2 wine glasses and washed them, making sure I got rid of my own fingerprints. Then, I took the bottle of wine and set it by the door so that I would remember to take it on my way out. I looked around the house for any sort of security cameras. There weren't any, and then walked back into the kitchen and pulled out a butcher knife from one of the drawers. I walked back up to the bedroom, walked up to Tatia, and slit her throat open. Then I watched her die. When she was dead, I took her phone and shoved it into the cut in her throat, and then stuck the knife in her chest. I looked through her bag and took the receipt from the coffee shop with me as well, so no one would go asking around there. After making sure I hadn't gotten any blood on myself, I then walked back downstairs, took the wine bottle, and then drove my car out of her driveway. I didn't see anyone in the neighborhood, which made sense considering that people normally were eating dinner or asleep at this time. The thought that someone might have seen me with her crossed my mind, but I figured since I took the receipt, it would be a while before someone traced her back to that coffee house. Besides, by then, they probably wouldn't even remember that I was with her. The thought kept making me feel uneasy. However, the next day I got a haircut, and then 2 days later I dyed my hair. I was also growing out my facial hair now, just to be safe. I was getting messy and arrogant. I needed to be more careful, or I was going to get caught. So I decided not to kill anyone for at least another 2 weeks. Tatia's husband ended up finding her body. It was on the news for over a month.